Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I am not a natural born speaker, so you might please excuse my ums and hesitations. Because my heart is racing a little bit, I'm going to play a piece first right off the bat here. I'm going to share my screen, share sound. Okay, so that was a tune. That's an old Celtic tune that I arranged called Geordie. Um, and I'd like to just point your attention to this guitar. I found this guitar sticking out of a dumpster um, here, actually in Rochester, New York. And I couldn't believe it. And I got it out of the trash. It had no strings on it. The back was completely off of it. The top was all cracked and coming off the sides. The fretboard was really dinged up. It was just in really bad shape. It was missing the pegs and it had no bridge. The little white part, not the actual, like the saddle, I guess. Um, and so I took it out of the trash, and I went and did some research, and it said Washburn inside, and I looked up the numbers in it, and it turns out that this was made in 1905 by people in the Washburn factory. It's actually signed by Mr. Washburn, and so I fixed this guitar up from the breaking point. Basically, someone was throwing it away, and I glued the back on. I glued the braces from the inside back on. Did a lot of work on the inside. Um, Fitted the saddle. Got new pegs to hold the strings in, and glued together all the cracks on the top. And then I did as much as I could to get rid of some dings in the fretboards, and I dressed the frets. They were in really bad shape. I did work on the peg head. In other words, I took this old thing that was someone was throwing away and refurbished it to the point to where what you heard just now is what it sounds like, and I absolutely love this instrument. It turns out that Washburn was making guitars at the same time as Martin. It might be a guitar name that you know much better, Martin Guitars. And many of the same luthiers worked in the Washburn factory that worked in the Martin factory. So some of the same people building Martins from this era that now sell for $40,000 may have made this very guitar. And it was in the trash, and I'm very happy to have it. Okay, so why am I telling you any of this? One, I'm proud to have saved this instrument, but I also want to use this guitar and also just this arrangement sort of as a metaphor for my compositional approach. I like old things. Um, and really, this work I've done on the guitar it's kind of a metaphor for what I see myself as. I don't see myself so much as an artist. I see myself as a craftsman, or I aspire to be a craftsman is probably a better way of putting it. I think that that is one of the highest things that I could ever hope to be, in my opinion, is a craftsman. And that's both in a literal sense, in that I literally try to be a craftsman in a literal sense, in that I do woodworking. This is a workbench made out of cherry from a tree that I salvaged, a fallen down tree, and I milled myself and I rived it by hand. I cut the joinery by hand, and I've never been prouder of a thing in my life. It's made out of cherry. It weighs probably 300 pounds, and I love working on it. It's not its finished state, but so I actually aspire to be a craftsman. But then musically speaking, I also identify much more as a craftsman than an artist. And that is no slight on artists at all. I hope to be an artist, but I tend to have the attitude that other people will decide if what I make is art or not. But I do hope that craftsmanship will at least come through as part of that artistic expression. That's just a long way around saying, I guess, a simple thing in how I see myself. So I like old things. I like working with my hands. I like building things in a really sort of functional way. Um, this also transfers into my life just as a person. I'm one of the few people left who don't have a cell phone. I just I've never had one. When I came to Italy, I had no cell phone. I managed to get there and back safely without a cell phone somehow. I know it dismays many of my friends that I don't, but it's just not something I've ever felt comfortable with when I've had one. It's just not a thing. And Zoom is like my worst nightmare. Just, yeah, I'm a little bit of a Luddite. So, in addition to this workbench, I've also in recent years started building instruments. Here are some of them. I've built, you'll see here on the left, I've long been building little instruments, simple instruments like ukuleles and simple banjos and flutes and things. But now I've really started to dive into making a fine crafted instrument. And while I have so much work to do, I do feel like I'm at a point where I'm okay showing you and telling you that I build instruments. Um, so I built an OM, which stands for an orchestra model guitar out of Adirondack spruce, ebony fingerboard, and mahogany on the back and neck. I built a Les Paul from scratch. This third from the right here, I have a terz style guitar that from plans from a 19th century design, and this is made out of cherry, and it's built from it's built from the offcuts of the workbench I built. And then I built this Telecaster here, two specs from the 50s. So I would just say, like, this is just to show you that I have interest in making things with my hands and building things from scratch to try to get my hands and brain around every little part of everything. And I like following plans. I like learning those things. And I'm going to try to apply that musically to you during this talk. here is a prototype. I'm also interested in new concepts. I'm not just like a Luddite and I only want old things, but I'm interested in new concepts as well. So this is a prototype for an instrument I've been building lately. It's an electric instrument that can be plucked or bowed. It's going to have 5 strings, tuned in fifths, Pythagorean fifths, and it's going to have 13 tones per octave. And I have a very particular reason for having 13 tones there. It's a temperament thing, which actually allows for very pure sevenths and thirds and elevenths, sharp elevenths. And so I'm always trying to push the boundary of this as well in old designs, but with new musical concepts at play. Okay, so now I'm going to play you a piece. I'm really hesitant and a little nervous to show you this because this is a work in progress, but I wanted to play this for you because this is, I think, the best glimpse into what I do as a composer, how I bring a piece into the world, and just my creative process. I feel vulnerable doing this because you're going to see me struggle. You're going to see me forgetting what's next, forgetting where my finger goes, stumbling through this piece. But I think it's an honest look at how I write a piece of music. So if you're like me, and I hope you're not because I'm tired a lot, but I often when it's like when the whiskey from the night before turns into sugars in my body and I wake up from that and I'm there in that liminal state between being asleep and waking up, there's usually an idea that comes to my mind that just festers in there until I get up and do something about it. And one particular night, this night, the night before this morning, I woke up and I was thinking about the Renaissance double leading tone cadence. It sounds that cadence. Hopefully you could hear that. And I got to thinking about it in that liminal state, and I got to just realizing that it has so much potential for modulation to other keys. And this was just bothering me, and so I got up and I got my instrument and I went downstairs where no one could hear me, and I looked at the clock and it was 2:30 in the morning. So, and I was like, oh, damn. Anyway, I started messing around with that idea of the double leading tone cadence. And eventually, by breakfast time, around 8 o'clock, I had written this piece. And I hadn't written it down. It was just sort of by feel and by thinking about the leading tone cadence and just trying it out. And so this was completely by rote. I'm not looking at music while I'm playing this, and that's why I'm forgetting things. But I would like to play this for you because it's my first attempt. So I'm building something by rote. I make the piece, and then I'm just recording it here so that I'll remember it, and I can have it as material later. Okay. Before I play it, I just want to point out that this is also an instrument I built. It's not my best sounding instrument, but it is capable of being in 12-tone equal temperament, 11 and 10 and 13-tone equal temperament. And it's an acoustic prototype I'm working on for that type of thing. The piece you're going to hear is in 12/10. All right, here it goes. Don't judge me too harshly. Okay, so yeah, I'm just trying to be brave. So sorry for the mistakes in there, but that's really how I compose most often. Is I'll wake up at an uncomfortable time of day, and then try to write these ideas. And I find that it usually has something to do with some historical little bit of information, like this double leading tone. Um, and so I'm working with an impetus that's sort of antiquated or older or historic in this case, and I'm doing it on an instrument that I've designed myself and that I'm trying to use to benefit my own playing style, right? So it's kind of a mixture between a mandolin, a cello, and a classical guitar, right? So all the techniques involved with those instruments are on there, and that impetus is something that helps drive me forward in writing pieces. So this piece is not really something I'm ever gonna use like that. And I don't think I could even play it anymore. But I this will make it into a piece eventually if I get um, the right group of instruments together, right, to write a piece for. Okay, um, so one more of these things that I basically woke up in the morning really early and had an idea that I wanted to write sort of a Bachian prelude. Not that the harmony or anything would be like Bach, but that I'd write a piece that's like one texture, like in Bach's Prelude and Fugue, right? Where it's usually just a texture and it goes through a harmonic series. And I wanted to know if I could write a piece like that. And so I spent the morning sort of working on a piece like that. And I'd like to play that for you. Okay, so that has one texture throughout, and like Bach, not in harmony, but just sort of in its affect. I think it's sort of like calling for something to follow after it, and that's sort of the idea behind the piece. And so during COVID, I got a commission to write a piece for solo viola. And so I found myself wanting to use this piece to see if it would work on viola. I played it on mandolin there, but I wondered if it would work as a viola piece. So I'm going to do something weird here and play that piece for you again, but in a different orchestration or a different instrumentation. And just to see, so I had to transcribe myself because I'd never written that down. And so then I had to go and see what I was doing and then transcribe it and then kind of change it to make it playable on um, the viola. Okay. I'm going to need to stop sharing here for a second because I think I can play this for you. Oops, what did I do? You still there? Okay. See, me and technology. It's just anyway. Oh, I see you've been chatting at me. Okay. I will read those, I promise. Sorry to ignore you. Um, Here we go. I'm going to try to use my desktop, and hopefully you can hear this while I show you the score. I'm going to try to do something technological here. Here we go. Okay. So thank you very much. At this point, I have a couple more pieces to play. They're a little bit longer and more, they include um, more than just one instrument, some of them. So, but at this point, I'd like to just pause and maybe peek through your comments and ask if you have any questions or comments at this point before moving forward. Pino.
Logan has a question.
Logan? Okay.
Go ahead, Logan. You're muted. Yeah.
Uh-oh, that's happened to me too. So can anyone unmute?
Oh yeah, I need to unmute him. Sorry, that's me. Sorry, I've been
Oh, okay.
bad. Okay, I was worried about interruptions. Go ahead. Sorry, Logan.
Right. Or can we hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Well, yeah, well, thanks for what you've shown so far. I'm just curious about, like, I guess in terms of like being a craftsman, like you have instrument building people and like the temperament people and composers and all of these things that like do things that take up like their entire lives, like for what they did in that point in history. So like I'm just curious what you think about like being a person that sort of focused on multiple different things and like what that means for someone today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question because I really think that it's super, super important to focus in on a thing, right? And some of the most beautiful work ever done has been done by people who were patient and worked over years and years and years on a single thing. The YouTube videos I watch are of like these guys that are in England somewhere and they're building a house and it takes them 10 years and they just focus on every single detail. And in a way, I think a lot of the venerable like bastions of classical music, like Beethoven and Brahms, for instance, and so many composers have achieved their grandeur and their artistic like level because they focused in for so long and never gave up and did that one thing for years and years and years. I really do believe that that's the way to become become great at anything, be it craftsmanship or artistry or whatever. But at the same time, I only have one life to live, and I'm just interested in too many things. And I also and I see this as a fault in myself in a way because I know that I need to focus on only being a craftsman or only being a composer or only any X whatever it is. But I just I just am too interested in other things, and I find myself having to put those things when I'm writing a piece of music. I have to just wear that hat and I put everything else aside. And luckily, I'm able to just focus on that. But I do think I'm probably missing something by by splitting myself. They're like Horcruxes or something. It's like my soul resides there and there and there, and it's just to put them together is always a challenge. And I think that's what I'm trying to do more. Is I'm starting to see more and more the connections between these things. And this is actually the music I'm going to show you next. Is for instance my playing the mandolin and playing fiddle music and being a folk musician, for instance. That is starting to influence my writing as a contemporary composer. Understanding the acoustics of an instrument on a luthier level helps me understand how to make an instrument sound great as a composer. So while they are disparate in discipline, I don't claim that I'm very good at any of them, but they are starting to form something that is one thing in my mind, if that makes any sense. And it might be total BS, I don't know, but that's how I'm feeling these days. So long-winded answer to your question, but thank you for answering it, asking it. Anyone else?
I love that can you hear me okay?
It's a little loud, but yeah.
I love that you collect your ideas, but of course someone like Mozart or Schubert or Beethoven would collect them in some kind of notebook, and they would use them later. Now collecting these videos late at night, and you're using them for viola pieces, as one example. And I kind of love that you have this reservoir of ideas that you're collecting, and you never know when you're going to use them. And that's something that maybe you've inherited from these other guys. But of course, Mr. Beethoven never had a video camera.
Right.
Anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thank you, everyone in the comments. I'm just reading through those. I appreciate it. Okay. Is it time? Can I share a little bit more music with you? Okay. I'm going to share my screen again, share the sound, desktop. So going back to this idea of using an old parameter, right, or an old antiquated idea as an impetus for something that I want to make my own. It's an impetus for something I want to create that's new. I got a commission a few years ago by the pianist Zach Bjerken, who teaches at Cornell and was my piano teacher when I was a student at Cornell. And he was going to learn and perform and record the Brahms Handel variations, which is a colossal work, one of the great set of variations I believe ever written. It's like 30 minutes long. It's got this epic fugue at the end. And he wanted it to be something that engaged Brahms's language, but that also, went beyond it, that showed sort of how these things could transcend their era, and that we could sort of see through the lens of all the music that's happened since Brahms. And he wanted it to be of similar size. So he wanted it to be the Brahms and this other piece. And so literally I received a commission to pit my skill against Brahms, right? And this was a terrifying commission. I worked on it for some months, and I kind of just jokingly agreed to it. But then I worked on it in secret, and then I delivered it to him in toto on Christmas, and he was blown away. And so this is one of those things where the Brahms starts. It's like this. It's that piece, and I thought, like, how am I gonna do this? It's a half an hour of music based on a theme like Brahms, and I have to engage that language and everything. How am I going to do this? But what I realized is I could do it just by being myself and using the disparate parts of what drives me as a person, as a craftsman, as an artist, maybe. And that is, I'm a folk musician. I play the mandolin, I play the fiddle, right, and banjo. And I know all these fiddle tunes. And so I picked a fiddle tune called Oklahoma Rooster because it has a really similar melodic and harmonic profile as the Brahms theme does, the Handel theme that Brahms set. And I just started going with it. Now, one thing I had to do was to make a piece that engaged the style. So I had to start with something that sounded Brahmsian, and then sort of morph it over this half-hour long piece into something that I felt was my own, right? And this was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But in using that fiddle tune, I had all this language, this musical language, to filter these ideas through. And it's one of the pieces of which I am most proud. And of course, Zach Bjerken just plays the absolute hell out of it. I'd like to play you the last 9 minutes of this. The movements are banjo. So there are, I believe, 11 movements before this, 11 variations. And they go pretty far afield, but then we come to the 12th variation, and I literally set it like a clawhammer banjo tune. So all of a sudden we're in bluegrass land, a piano version of it. And then I see this as the impetus to go to the end where I can really try to out Brahms. And so this is my attempt at doing that. I hope you enjoy it. So there you go. It's also maybe the grandest thing ever written. So, okay, I find myself in the position where I don't have enough time to play the rest of what I was going to play. So I guess I'll just open it up to any questions or comments you might have, or topics of discussion, and then we'll call it. So any questions or comments? Yes, Luke.
Well, Jesse, as always, fantastic. I've known you and your music for quite a while, and the one thing that I really like about your music is there seems to be a very clear character and, for lack of a better word, soul, and it makes the music distinct. Each piece has its own flavor. You're not writing the same piece over and over and over. So my question that I want to ask is, you know, you talk about being a craftsman and doing all these different things, and yet everything you produce is of such high quality. What's difficult for you? I mean, in the composition process, is it all just seems to like fall out of your
so
magic
easy.
pen? What do you struggle with? What's the hardest part for you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I just want to say that, you know, nothing is easy. I don't feel like anything is easy. I struggle with wondering if I'm doing anything meaningful. I wonder if I struggle with like wanting to do the work of composing for the, you know, the probable outcome of, like, you know, one performance, you know, months of work for one performance, that kind of thing. I struggle with every step of composing a piece, right down from like, what will the, you know, what am I going to express? Like, what will it be? What's my design? In other words, what plans can I use to make a piece? How can I combine what I know? It's a colossal effort every time. And a lot of people have commented in the past about that I have quite a large output, and I just think that's because I never sleep, actually, and it comes at a cost, you know, like such a large output comes at a cost of like sometimes just being grouchy, you know, and having to like go on with things and to keep a good attitude about everything. I think is my biggest struggle in the composition world, because it is anything but easy to be a composer. And that goes right down just to the hours that it takes. It's physically exhausting to sit in a place that for the required amount of time to make a piece. It's mentally just excruciating to try to like really be engaged with every single note, make sure everything's absolutely in place. It's a colossal undertaking, and I struggle with every single part of it. I just think that how I feel is that I just sort of have a disease where I feel compelled to undergo that particular type of suffering because I want to create things. And it's the same kind of, there are a lot of really difficult tasks for making a workbench or building a kitchen table or, you know, building a guitar. There's so many little details, and it's so hard to, if you think about them all, you'll never do it. You just have to do each step as you come to it next, and eventually the thing will be what it can be. And also just coming to terms with that it's not going to be as good as you want it to be, ever. But just always striving for being as good as you can. It's really hard, but that's sort of my attitude towards it.
I think John Paul has a question.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Jesse. I first just loved everything that you shared.
Thank you.
It's yeah, a definite all jams, all bangers, all it hits.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could go into, I have, I think, maybe a similar background. I was a guitarist, a blues folk guitarist kind of thing. And I had a difficulty reconciling that tradition because I came later in classical. And so those were kind of compartmentalized. And it's been a journey for me to understand how those relate. I was wondering if you might elaborate on yours, because you said you're kind of going through a similar understanding of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big topic, one I've grappled with, I think, for 20 years in my 20-year composition career. I actually started out as a classical musician. When I was a kid, I wanted nothing more than to be a concert pianist. And I was on that route until I broke my arm as a teenager. And then I came to composition. And actually, after breaking my arm, that's when I learned guitar, because I was in a cast. I couldn't play piano, and I learned. My sister had a mandolin and a guitar, and I just sort of sat there and tried to move my fingers in these shapes. And so I'm coming at it from classical music first, and then as a folk musician second. Although the folk me has eclipsed the piano me now. So what I found is that I didn't know how to negotiate the stylistic trappings of either discipline, how to meld them into one thing. And eventually I'd made many attempts over the years, over the decades, really, of doing it that were total failures. And sometimes I still really fail at it, and I'll throw that piece away. But I think it just has to do with being okay that it's okay. I mean, it's the 21st century. I think we should be okay if something is stylistically something here and stylistically something else here in this piece. It's just sort of like, how do you turn it into a single statement? And I personally have found that it doesn't matter how weird or how disparate your A section and your B section is, as long as you can sort of plug that into a meaningful form, and then they can create a dialogue with each other. And I've gone just as simple as that, where it's like, I've got this Alberti bass thing, right? It's very pianistic and Mozartian. And then I have the thing over here that's like an E blues. Can I put those in the same piece? And I'll just really work at that until it sort of turns into something that I'm okay with. Might be weird, but I think that process of trying that juxtaposition out and has really yielded results, because now I'm starting to see the similarities between the different musical styles, and I can start to distill it down into basically just a harmonic concept, and how to recontextualize like a lick in a bluegrass tune, for instance, and see how it fits into all these other, Messiaen's modes, like the hexatonic scale. And so I know what to do with those systems as a composer, and do these fit into those systems? And if so, how? If they don't, can I exploit that difference, right? So I don't know if that's a definitive answer at all, but that's sort of how I've negotiated that.
No, really helpful. Thank you.
And then we have Luca.
Yeah, thank you. Jesse, wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
You say that you are not a natural born speaker, but that's not true. Okay, no, I appreciate so much the thing you say, that you love all things. Yeah, me too, and I totally understand you when you say that, because I think the bounds with the past are maybe the most important thing we have as composers, as artists, maybe not artists, as craftsmen, sorry. And about craftsmanship, yes, I actually had a question, but I see there is no time, because I would like to know something more about the techniques of in your variations. But maybe another time.
We can totally talk about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In a nutshell, just quickly, 2 minutes, it's really largely polymodality and polytonality, and using motives within those. I really see, I see what I'm doing now when I try to like explain to another composer what it is I do. I feel like I'm taking folk elements, just like Bartók took folk elements like Hungarian, Macedonian folk songs. I take like, you know, a Celtic tune that I know on the fiddle, or a fiddle tune that I, you know on the mandolin or something, or anything like in a folk style that I wrote or something. And I try to make it more accepting of chromaticism. And I do that in a motivic way where, you know, especially like in that last movement, I had the theme going sometimes absolutely strictly in 4 different keys at once and in different tempi all at the same time. So I might have it going 1 speed here, 1.5 times the speed in another layer in another key, and then 2 times the speed in another layer in yet another key, for instance. And that's what I find exciting, just in that if you isolate any one part, it's diatonic music, right? Maybe with a few like folky inflections, but put together as a whole, it's often like a complete 12-note set, right? So that's what I mean by polymodality. So that's like the essence of what my language is in sort of theoretical terms.
No, that's very clear.
Yeah, great.
Great. Thank you
Okay.
for such a wonderful presentation. So that concludes our Tutti hour for the day, and hopefully I'll see you at 8 o'clock.